Good evening, everyone. My name is Isaac Forsyth. Thank you very much for the introduction. And the only thing I will just basically add for now is that the aim, which is kind of common to all of us, of like what I'm trying to do for myself and trying to share with us here and with others, is to broaden horizons. I think that's really the aim of what we're trying to do, is to sometimes learn something maybe which we didn't know before, or even if there's something that we knew before, but maybe have a little bit of a different angle on it, maybe think about it in a way we haven't thought about it before. And the general theme really is to broaden our horizons and leave these sessions a bit more open than we came in. So that's the general gist. So let's embark on this project together. So the particular topic today, it was entitled Finding Spirituality in the Natural World. So let's begin with a story which happened to me. So I teach in a bunch of different interesting places, primarily in Jerusalem, and one of the places I teach is a midrashah, which is like a women's Torah learning institution, women's Torah learning college. And one of the women came up to me after a session that I gave, probably because I give slightly different kinds of sessions than other people, and she said, I very much connect by going out into the forest. There's a forest in Jerusalem, right? So going out into the forest, going out into nature, and I feel very spiritual when I do this. And like, and she kind of like didn't ask an explicit question, but she's kind of saying like, what do you think about this? Like, and it seemed to me that she had some kind of, maybe she'd been told by someone that maybe that wasn't the right thing to do, or something, and she was kind of expecting, she was kind of asking me in some ways almost for permission to do it, but expecting that maybe the answer would be no. So this was a question which I was posed. So let's just take a moment, and so you be the rabbi. You are the rabbi, and this young lady comes and asks you, I like to go out into nature to connect to God, to connect to spirituality. What do you think about that? This is a good thing, it's a bad thing, it's a
grasshopper, right?
That's what I said to her, actually. Okay, good, very good. That's a very advanced answer. But maybe we'll come back to that in a moment. But I'll repeat that for everyone. Let's see. What else? What do you think? What do you think about this?
Straight away, it's okay.
I think
It's okay.
a very good thing.
It's a very good
thing. God is connected to love and nature.
Connected to love. Okay.
It's connected. Yeah, it's all connected.
Okay.
So there's no, I don't see.
Okay, so we've got.
Oh,
Sorry. I should repeat. Sorry, I'm really bad at this. I should repeat. So Shari's saying it's an easy yes. God is connected to love and nature, so that would be a perfectly good, valid way to connect. What else do people think?
Yeah, and if we see God as creator, whatever we mean by that,
Yeah.
then in a sense everything is infused by the divine spirit.
Yeah.
It makes me think also of Islam and the idea of the names of God, and that everything is a sign. So in Islam, everything is in Arabic an ayah, a sign of God, and the attributes of God are there within everything in the world, and within everything in our human experience as well. So there's nothing that is devoid of God.
Yeah, very good. So Gareth, right?
Yes.
Gareth's saying over here that I see Julian in a second. Okay, great. Gareth is saying so. Yeah, a few different interesting points which we're going to touch on, actually, a lot of them. But that God, in terms of being a creator, so he's a creator of nature, so he's there. Also, in terms of an idea, it's interesting enough, relates to Islam. I didn't know, but it's going to relate a lot to what we're going to talk about today in terms of the attributes of God to be found in nature, and even events, which is bringing it even broader, which I'm very glad. There's kind of like two categories of things in the world, right? There's entities and there's events. There's like, in some ways, there's like the anatomy of the world, the things in the world, and there's the physiology, the things which happen in the world. So in all of these things, there could be God to be found. I think there's a couple of things from Zoom over here. Julian?
Okay. I think that some of us find it very difficult to connect to any form of spirituality in our everyday lives. There's so much interference and disturbance going on. And different people find different places where they can get, that this is not impinging on them all the time, and they have space in their mind to think about spirituality, about creation, about God, and connect to God. And so, yeah, I think this is one way of doing it, but obviously it's going to be different for a lot of people. But I can really empathize with this need to get out and to be at peace in order to be able to think of things beyond oneself and the humdrum.
Yeah, 100%. So Gillian's bringing up an additional point, which is even aside from the nature itself, but just the piece of it and the fact that life is so hectic and there's so many things going on out in the world and in our own minds, and this can be a way to find a little bit of inner peace and connect and just find the space to connect. So I think that's a really good start. I'll come back also just to the Ethel, right? So just what Ethel said. So she said this person should be a Breslaver. Does anyone know what that means? Breslav Chassidut. Okay, so have you heard it? Right. So anyone ever heard of Rabbi Nachman of Breslav? Okay, so so it's a recent favorite of mine. This genre of Hasidic thoughts. But basically, yeah, there's different groups, different Hasidic groups out there, and on average, probably you would imagine that the Hasidim are quite good at this kind of thing in general, being a little bit more broad in their connections to Judaism, God, spirituality. But Breslov in particular, this particular group of Hasidim, so they're kind of known for going out into the forest, and also something called Hibodedut, which means it means isolation actually, but it means like alone time in some ways. I mean, alone time, often people scream. It's quite funny. They go to the forest and scream, Abba, like our Father in heaven, and things like that. But it's actually, yeah. So that's actually basically what that's one of the things that I told her.
Well, because Rabbi Nachman teaches, like, I mean, he every day would go do this to the forest. That's how he'd start his day. So
and
if it works for you, you should make it your lifestyle.
And as Gillian was saying, we're not necessarily prescribing what the particular dose of spirituality for every person, but we want to explore today what are the opportunities. That's what we want to explore. What are the opportunities? So with that, let's dive in and see a few sources. So I just want before anything to actually just do you mind passing there's a Tanakh just right behind you. I just prepared there, which I forgot to put on the source sheet. Apologies. We are almost ready to share the source sheet. I'll get there in just a moment. But one line which a lot of us are familiar with, it appears in Isaiah, in Yeshaya, and it's talking about a line that the angels say about creation. Where are we? Somewhere over here, and it says, the angels call to each other and they say, Kadosh, 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 Hashem Tzavakot, Meloch Chol Haaretz Kavodo. That holy, holy, holy is the God of legions. The whole world is filled with His glory. So Meloch Chol Haaretz Kavodo. So this is just a basic line from our Tanakh, from the Hebrew Bible, that is basically saying we need to work out how this is true and how we can connect to this. But the answer to the question is that the whole world is indeed filled with God's glory. So it's not going to just be in the synagogues that you're going to be able to find godliness. It's not just going to be even in the Beit Midrash, even in the study halls that you're going to. It's not only on the Sabbath that you're going to be able to find God's glory. It's going to be at all times and all places. So we're going to try and work out how that is. But that's the starting point. Is that's really that's the reality. And so let's see what we can do to see how we can actually relate to that and what that can actually mean. So I think we're ready for a screen share, Janet, if that's okay. So the main source that we're going to deal with today is from a book called Da'at Tzavunot, which is by the Ramchal, Rabbi Moshe Chaim Luzzatto, who was in, amazing, yeah, thank you very much. So yeah, this main box will do us for now. So Rabbi Moshe Chaim Luzzatto is an unbelievable, amazing a Torah legend, as it were, and he was in Italy. I think he was in around, he was like the 18th century, I think. Maybe he went into the 19th. I'm not sure. I think he was in the 18th century, if I'm not mistaken, in Italy. So even the Vilna Gaon, who was one of the great leaders of kind of the next generation, I think they overlapped a little bit in their lifetime, but not so much. He said that, and he was in Lithuania, in Vilnius in Lithuania. He said if the Ramchal was still alive at that time, he would have walked all the way to Italy to learn at his feet. So we're talking about a very special person here. As happens to many special people, he had his books burned. As you know you're doing something right if you got your books burned, basically. But this book over here, Da'at Abunat, is this unbelievable book where he goes through really in many ways all of the main things that we believe in, especially focusing on the things which are hard to understand out of what we believe, and he does so in the form of a dialogue between the soul and the intellect. It is an amazing thing. So highly recommend it. And here he has a section on prophecy and how prophecy works. So the context for the piece that we're going to read over here is actually talking about prophecy, and he's explaining why it is that or the intellect in this particular case, is explaining why it is that imagery is a big thing in prophecy. Why isn't prophecy just clear verbal communication? Why is the Tanakh full of images and kind of almost like prophetic experiences, where he's seeing all kinds of different things and experiencing all kinds of different things? Like, why is it like that? So that's the general context of what we're reading here. But in doing so, he really says some amazing things about nature and about the godliness in nature. So this is one way. This is not the only way. This whole thing is not the only way to relate to God, and this particular thing that we're talking about tonight is not the only way to relate to Meloch Haaretz Kavodo, that God's glory is in everything. But this is one way, which is, for me, when I learned this, was a fascinating game changer. So I wanted to share it with you guys tonight. Okay, so I'm going to read in Hebrew. I've given you the English there. Up to you. If it's helpful to you, you can read along in the Hebrew or in the English. If it distracts you, I'm not very good multitasking, so I can't read along at the same time someone else is reading. So know yourself and whatever's best, but at least you have it to take away. Okay, so here we go. So we're going to read a little bit over here, and then we'll delve into it together. So he says, "Hine, הסדר והדרך שלקח האדון ברוך הוא להיות מעתיק בו ענייני השפעה אל ענייני הצורה של התחתונים." He said, behold, the order and the way that God chose in order to yeah, good. Oh, amazing. Thank you, Jillian. Jillian, so you can see that there. So he was in the 18th century indeed. So there we go. So he said the way that God literally like copies himself. Ma'atik, hetek in modern Hebrew is like a copy, like a photocopy. So the way that he copies in Yanei Hashpa'ah, the matters of his bestowal, i.e. his relationship to the world. So he copies them El Inyanei Tzura Shel Tachtonim into the form of the lower existences, i.e. our world and everything we see around us. Mm-hmm. So God takes his, what we'll soon call midot, his characteristics, the way he relates to the world, and he, as it were, he photocopies them, he copies them onto all of the things which exist in the lower realms, i.e. in the world that we experience. As we explained, this affects a lot regarding the existence of all of these created things in all of their forms. So what we're going to see here is that there's this general idea that God has characteristics in the way that he relates to the world. God in and of himself, of course, is infinite and we can't really understand God's essence, but in the way that God relates to the world, he has certain characteristics, which we'll talk about, called the midot or the sphirot. So God has these things and he wants to teach us about them. So what did he do? He made copies of these things in the world. And so these things are, so if you want to look around the world, you're going to be seeing reflections of the attributes and the characteristics of God, which relates a lot to what Gareth said earlier. Yeah.
So when it says that we're all made in God's image, could you take a look
This
at
is
it
amazing,
and
yeah.
say, we're not actually talking about, our faces or our bodies, but are we actually talking of, is it the image of God? Is it the characteristics that make up the soul and everything else?
Yeah, so the point there is, what does it mean to be made in the image of God? Maybe, are we talking about some kind of physical image that God has? So we're obviously not talking about that, no such thing. But it could be that we're made in the image of God's characteristics. Could it be? Let's see. The answer is absolutely yes. No, us and the whole world is a reflection of God's characteristics. So let's have a look at that. But it's a new view also. It's interesting. What does it mean, Tselem Elokim? What does it mean to be made in the image of God? Very interesting. Okay, so Misa. I'm going to give you the Ram Chazal. I'm going to give you an example. Lefi Sharat Adon Baruch Hu La'atik Inyan Hashkachato El Inyan Ha'ayin. When God wanted to, or since God wanted to copy the idea of his hashgacha, of his supervision of the world and his management of the world, to the human eye. So we're going to see that. So it's al kain yesh ha'ayin ba'atan. Therefore, we have an eye. Meaning, this is a very interesting idea. It's like we think that we have an eye, and that's fine. That's how I have a body. I look how I look, and then there's me and there's God. And maybe we interact with each other if we're lucky. But the way that I look is not a given. The way that I look is specifically because God wanted to teach us something about Him. So He made us look a certain way, and in this particular example He's giving is the eye. So let's have a look at what might that mean in terms of God's hashgacha, his management and supervision of the world. It says, Lafi, sheratza latik midot hashgachato, since he wanted to copy or reflect the characteristics of his supervision of the world, and he's going to give three categories of these: midat chesed, midat hadin, midat harachmin. The three main characteristics of the way that God looks after the world. One is called chesed, which we'll call for now kindness. One is called din, which is justice, and one is called rachamim, which is compassion or mercy. So these are the three ways that God looks after the world. So since He wanted to teach us about them, el inyan hagvanim halavan haadom v'hayarok. So He wanted to copy them onto these different colors, essentially, which is the white, the red, and the green. Maybe that's the correct translation, but let's call it like that for now. So lechein yesh shlosh advanim ele be'eno shel ha'adam. That's why we have three parts of our eye. That's why we have three parts of our eye, because God has three ways that He relates to the world, and in His supervision of the world, that's why your eye looks like the way that it does. That's why it does. So maybe we'll go, and I'll just read the last line, and then we can try and understand this a bit more. So it says, "Velule hayarot." It just gets even more extreme here. So "Velule hayarot selatik inyanim ele b'derech hazeh." If God had not wanted to reveal Himself and to kind of reflect Himself in the world in this way, lo hayu evarim ele b'chalakim v'chalkehem ba'adam. Then you wouldn't have these limbs. You wouldn't have these parts of your body. Aval evarim v'chalakim achrim. You would have different. You would look different. You would look different if God's characteristics were different. If you wanted to teach something different, you would look different. V'zeh pashut. That's simple. Okay, so apparently that's simple. Okay, so we can do whatever we want with that. Okay, so that's very intense. So let's just process some of that. Yeah.
Can you clarify something about the concept of colors? Because I did a master's work and published about color perception.
Okay,
and color blindness. So I'm just curious about these colors. So because I know there's red and green photopigment, but there's also blue photopigment.
Yeah. So
and what does this actually mean? Because I have the scientific background.
This is how,
and I'm also thinking of the spiritual background.
Yeah. So let me know if so let's go like broader and then we're now. So the broader thing that we're learning here, and the very, very broad thing that we're learning here is the world looks the way that it does because it's a reflection of God's midot, God's characteristics, the way that God interacts with the world. And so, which we'll come back to, but the kind of bottom line is that, kind of as pretty much as Gareth was saying, that God can be discovered in everything, and not just can, but ought to be. Meaning that's the point, that's the reason that things look the way that they do, is because God wants to share himself with you, and this is a way that you're going to be able to access him. So that's the very, very broad point. Now, moving a little bit more local, so let's talk about one particular thing. We're eventually going to get to the pie chart. So there's something called hashgacha. So there's different ways that God relates to the world. One is hashgacha, his management of the world. You know, God's a creator, that's one thing, and God's a redeemer, all different kinds of things. But God is also a mashgiach. It's funny because that's the name of my new job as well, which is being a mashgiach, which means to look after the spiritual needs of the people in the yeshiva. But that's funny. That was not on purpose. But God's ashgacha, God's supervision and management of the world. So that's one of his jobs, as it were. That's one of the ways he interacts with the world. So within that form of interaction, there's 3 categories. And if you want here, maybe I won't go into it so much, but if you want, there's really 10 midots that would say that God has, 10 characteristics. It's in this image at the bottom. If it helps you, great. If it doesn't help you, don't worry. But if you want, what we're just talking about here is the very middle 3. If you want, so we've got chesed, if you see on the right there, it's chesed. On the left, you've got gevura, which relates to din, and in the middle, you've got tiferet, which relates to rachamim. Again, if it helps you, great. If it doesn't help you, don't worry about it. But meaning, we're only picking up on some things here. There's more. But this is what we're talking about. So
what's the translation of the 3 that you're picking, that you're going to...
yeah, let's get to that now. So I'll just use, even though there's slightly different terminology in the image I gave you, let's just use the terminology that the Ramchal gave in his text. So there's 3 ways that God interacts with the world and looks after the world in that sense. So one is with chesed. So we can translate that as kindness. So if you think about let's think of, I don't know if anyone has an example of a recent time when God did something kind for them. So I think I'll give one. Anyone got any ideas?
Martin was in the hospital, and I was all week, and I was really upset. And I went into the store to buy things, and I don't know, I felt really sorry, but I was, I don't know, in prayer.
Yeah.
And as I went to the counter, the person who was serving me handed me a whole bouquet of flowers. And said to me, "This is for you."
That's
and I about to burst into tears. And I said, "It's for he just wants you to have this." And they had I hadn't said anything. And I then went home and gave this to Martin. So that wonderful.
That's amazing. Brilliant. Yeah. So just to check, people on Zoom, are you hearing when other people around the table are speaking, or should I repeat what they say?
Speak up.
And if anyone's give me a shout on that.
If you could repeat them, that would be great. I'm struggling to hear.
Okay, sure. Yeah, no problem. No, I expect that.
Thank you.
I won't tell just so everyone knows, I won't tell the story as well. But just to summarize. But yeah, Shari was just saying that we were talking about, has anyone got an example where there appears, God has interacted with them with chesed, with kindness. In recent times, which I was giving an example, is an unbelievable thing where a husband, unfortunately, has been in hospital over the course of the week, and it's been a very hard experience. And went to the shop within the hospital, right? Really? That's even more. Wow.
No, not within the hospital. Just at the corner shop where I live.
Even more amazing. Yes, just went to the corner shop after a very, very hard week, and went to the corner shop, and just without any prior knowledge or anything, the person handed to her a bouquet of flowers, said, "These are for you," and just out of nowhere, and she was able to go and give it to her husband. An amazing thing. So that we can call a kindness. That's a chesed. That's a chesed of God, and via this person who is the emissary in this particular case. So that's one way that God can interact with the world, through kindness. You also have another way, which is din, which is justice, which is a harder interaction, but nevertheless an important one. You can give an example if you want. It's not so easy for us to say, but let's just give it an easy, like a non-controversial example. Let's just talk about God dealing with the ancient Egyptians, and when it was time for the Exodus, and God did a lot of judgments of the Egyptians who had been basically doing a Holocaust against the Jews, for killing the children, all different kinds of terrible, terrible things. And God saw that there was justice for them at that time, through the plagues, through the sea, all different kinds of things. And so that's an example. God can also interact with the world in a strict way with justice. Do you want to say?
No.
Yeah,
I was just thinking what you're saying.
Yeah. There's more modern examples, but I just don't want to get into the controversy. And then there's a really interesting midah, which is called rachamim. Very, very interesting, which is like compassion or mercy. So that's a really interesting one, because that's when it's not necessarily that you deserve something good, but you need something good. And in that way, that can happen a lot. It's a really interesting kind of thing also for us to think about ourselves.
I have an example.
Yeah, please. Yeah, brilliant.
Do you know Rabbi Kilstein? He's
not firsthand. Everyone's talking to me about him these days.
Okay,
Yeah,
because
Which rabbi?
he's in Jerusalem
Yeah.
also.
He teaches in one of the same places as me, but we haven't met.
You should connect. He's really cool.
Great.
I met him at
No, I
seminary.
just didn't hear.
Oh, Rabbi Kilstein.
Oh, right.
He's based in Nachlot, and he also teaches to like all sorts of
Yeah.
conventional, not unconventional people. But I listen to his classes a lot, and he had one about like Mashiach and like the idea of like redemption, and he was basically saying, and it was really interesting and kind of reassuring that like it can be very stressful, I think, being part of the Jewish people, especially when we're not in a state of unity, and being like how could we ever possibly like, because there's like teachings that say that like we're only going to get to like Mashiach, like we're only going to get to the world in its perfect state if like the Jewish people can do XYZ, and you think like, well, how could they do XYZ? But then there's this understanding that like Hashem knows that, and he knows that we're not gonna. So I guess like this mercy, it's like you're not living up to the standard. It's not, and God gives you something anyway. And in this class, it was like God's gonna give us like redemption and this ultimate peace anyway. It's like there's nothing we could do to deserve it, and we know that, and you're sitting with that, but then you get this mercy.
That's a great point. So just so Ethel was just saying that there's this idea that in terms of bringing about Mashiach, the Messiah, and the kind of positive world perfection in the end of days, and all this final redemption, so that the ideal is that we earn it for ourselves. But it's not looking amazing in terms of that. Obviously, there's good things going on, but there's a lot of very hard things going on for us, and there's nevertheless an idea that God's not going to abandon us just because we don't manage to make it over the line ourselves. He wants to give us the opportunity to make it over the line ourselves. But even if we don't, he's still going to be there for us. Still going to have mercy. He's still going to redeem us in a compassionate way, which is
Can I just say, I just love the thing about compassion and mercy, because there's so many rules in this world, and if we just went according to the rules, we know that it doesn't make sense for lots of situations. And I think when it was shown to me, just one example of what was really shown to me, most people know of Andrew, my son, Alav Shalom. And when we were in the hospital, when he really was unwell at the end, there are all these rules. The hospital's full of all these rules, at the worst time of your lives. And we could, it's this thing like you can't have more than 2 people in the room, you can't use your mobile phone, but wait for it. So at one stage, I really wanted to take him home, and he wasn't going to make it if I took him home. And the head nurse said to me, go and have a cup of tea. I need to do something to Andrew. I promise you don't need to be there. And I came back and I started walking towards his room. And he said to me, he's not in that room. He's in this room. You bring whatever you want. You have whoever you want. You do whatever you want. And I said, but Penny, there are all these rules. And she just said to me, well, and she was the head nurse. Rules are made to be broken.
Absolutely. Yeah.
You tell the full version of the story, but there's an interesting thing that there's in things in terms of rules. There's examples in terms of a hospital, and then on the one hand, the hospital is a place which has rules like everywhere else. On the other hand, it's a place, especially in the ICU and things like that, where people have a lot of sensitivities. And there's one way of dealing with rules, which is the rule. That's it. These are the rules, and that's it. That's called din. There's no flexibility. There's another way of dealing with rules called chesed, because there are no rules, and that's obviously not going to work in like say a hospital or in most settings. But then there's a middle way, which is called compassion, which is like rachman, which is like we have rules, but you know what? Sometimes there's a time and a place for mercy. So yeah, I think that's really helpful.
I was thinking, Isaac, as well of the I almost don't want to follow what you were saying, Jane, because that was just so special and personal. But while we've been thinking about the Exodus and in terms of justice, I was thinking also, Isaac, of and correct me because I'm going to get bits of this wrong. Not an expert, but the midrash on the when the Egyptians drown in the Sea of Reeds, and the angels are rejoicing.
That's a great example.
And Hashem says, how can you rejoice when my children are drowning in the sea? And I just thought that for me, I always find that incredibly moving. And amidst the justice attribute, there is pure compassion.
Well said. Because I think that that's an important. It's a very important story. I'll just repeat in the midrash regarding the Exodus, and overall for the Egyptians, the Exodus was very much a time of justice and getting what they deserved for terrible things. And yet, when the culmination of all that was when the Egyptian army had run after the Israelites, and they were trying to chase them, and then God collapsed the sea on them and they were drowning. And the angels wanted to sing to God for the great salvation that he had done for Israel when doing so. And God said, how can you sing to me when the work of my hands is drowning in the sea? And you see in that moment that there's some, that's kind of like a compassion, there's a we've not forgotten about everything, or God hasn't forgotten about everything in a time, even in a very harsh time. And I will just note, which you kind of alluded to, or maybe even just said, but the fascinating thing is, it's God who's drowning them. It's not someone else. So it's not like, oh, God's like disagreeing with this idea of drowning. No, there's even at the time of the justice, there's something called compassion, which is interesting. So it doesn't mean he says, oh, since they're my handiwork, I'm not going to drown them. No, there's something called justice, but you don't have to gloat in the justice. It's all very interesting.
Exactly.
Gillian, you want to say?
Yeah, I think that one of the characters who comes out strongest in the Tanakh, and setting the example of compassion is Abraham, because he was both kind and he was compassionate. He was kind and he welcomed people, and he was compassionate. He didn't want the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah, and there could be no, that he argues with God. There must be something in the quality of these people that they deserve to be saved. They don't deserve to die. And he doesn't let go on this one.
Again, it's interesting because you do find that balance in that exact moment, meaning, well, you find an unbelievable compassion and mercy that Abraham is having. Sodom, which is a city which is by all means doing bad things in general. He's not unaware of that. But he says we don't want the good to, like, the baby to be thrown out with the bathwater. We don't want, if there's good individuals there, we don't want to just kind of sweep it all aside. And so he's praying, and he's just, as you say, he's arguing with God, and he's doing what he can, even though he's himself in that moment is not ignoring. He's not saying there's no rules. He's not saying that there's no that we just let things slide. But he's saying that we don't want the the good and the bad to get mixed up. That he says that's basically what he says. Julian.
And the opposite is the fact that the prophet Jonah finds it difficult to empathize with the people of Nineveh, and God is completely compassionate. I mean, it's not a really bad world. I mean, they're the two extreme examples.
That's a good master's. I don't know if anyone needs a master's idea, but that's a good to compare the story of Abraham, who's arguing with God to save the people, and then you have Jonah. God is arguing with him to be compassionate on people. That's quite interesting. Anyways, you can do that comparison. The story. Okay, so this is right. So we're now ready for Shari's question. So what does that have to do with the eye? So there are three ways. There are three ways we see that God interacts with the world, and of course we're trying to make it in isolation, but of course usually it's a mixture of different things which are happening in every moment. Every moment's complex and all that. So as we have in our eye, we have three parts of our eye. So he says that there's three colors. So there's white, red, and green. So what's that refer to? So basically it's a little bit funny, but it appears to refer to not necessarily the perception, like the colors that we perceive, but actually the colors of the eye itself. So the white color that's the white, that's the easiest one for us to understand. We have the white of our eye. And then what he calls the red appears to mean the what's it called? The pupil, what we call the pupil. If you shine a light into the for us, you think it's black. It's not really black, it's dark. But if you shine a light, then it's red, right? Although take a picture, right? The red eye thing. So the actual color of it is red. It's just it looks black because it's in the dark. And so that's the red is like the pupil, and then the iris, right, is what he calls the green. So maybe, I mean, anyone here was also maybe Julian as well. If I'm not incorrect, at least in the works of the sages, maybe even in the Torah itself, the word yarok, it doesn't just mean green. It can be quite a flexible color. I don't know if anyone knows anything about that.
Like hazel.
Oh yeah,
I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't know.
It could be. I mean, I'm. They say that the sages say that Esther her skin was yarok. That's what they say. So I don't think actually it's funny because there's a movie, right? Or it's a wicked, right? So I don't think it meant. I don't think it meant.
Wouldn't have been green.
I don't think it was. Maybe she had olive skin.
Maybe olive,
sure.
yes.
But you see that the word yarok is actually a little more of a flexible color. Yeah.
So maybe it's olive because yarok is vegetables too. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I can see.
So it could be greenish, yellowish,
Could be,
bluish.
could be.
But either way, the point is referring to the iris, or what we call the color of the eye, if you want. So basically, we have these three parts of our eye. We have the white, we have the reds, or maybe we can call the black, the red, the black, and then we also have the iris, the color of the eye. So basically, what the Ramchal is saying is that God, in order to teach us about his ways of interacting with the world, he gave us these three parts of our eye. So what's the correspondence? So I think the correspondence is basically as follows. So the white is chesed. He lists it in this order, right? So the white is chesed, the white is kindness. Why is kindness? Kindness is like unlimited. Kindness is like a blank canvas. You can go anywhere. Kindness is as it were, like, no rules. It's unlimited in that sense. And that's kind of like white as a color is unlimited, as we say, kind of a blank canvas. It can go anywhere. So that's like the chesed. Then you have the reds, which is like the pupil. So that's din. So that's the harshest of the color, be it black or be it red. That's kind of like the harshest of the colors, and that's the harshest of the modes of interaction. And then you have the thing in the middle of the two, which is the balance, which is the rachamim, the tiferet, the compassion, that's always what we're looking for, is the balance there. So you have these three things, and it's quite interesting that these are reflected in the eye, because we are used to, but this is maybe where Shari can come in again. It's quite interesting because we before you study anything about perception or anything like that, think that the eye is like a passive receiver of information. And so you think, and that's kind of funny because we're learning here that the eye is meant to reflect how God looks after the world, which is quite an active thing. And yet, that's actually how vision works.
But there's a difference, I think, between physical perception and prophetic vision. Because, I know in Second Sight, there's a quote by mind and eye see, as it were, beyond the bounds of space and time into that state where all is one eternal now. And the eternal now is in the wellspring of a spiritual connection to God.
Yeah.
So there's something here. I'm sitting on this. I'm trying to sit on this about the actual perception, the physical perception, but also the brain. Fills in things and in terms of perception, but then there's the physical perception, but there's the mind's eye. And the mind's eye perception is really where it connects to to the spiritual and the
So
soul
yeah,
and God.
so that's definitely going to be part of it. So talking about Sherry's bringing up, there's physical perception on the one hand, and then there's also like prophetic or spiritual perception, which is going beyond those bounds of physicality. Interestingly enough, I'll even say is that two things. So one is kind of what I got from psychology, and one is just what I got from life. Psychology, just in terms of what we studied, is that it turns out that perception is actually a very active process. Is that you don't just observe objective things, and we don't necessarily all see the same. There's a lot of processing which is involved, and so you see already it's not so simple that it's certainly not passive. That's one point. But the second thing we just got from life is that one of the greatest gifts you can give to someone is your attention. Is to, with literal eye contact or without literal eye contact, if you give someone your attention, then you're kind of giving them everything. You're kind of giving, if you are really there with them, and then you can give them so much, be it a friend or a child or anyone for that matter. So there you see the eye, which is like our attention, is actually a very active thing indeed. It's really a giver in many ways. The eye can be a giver in that sense. And so we see this example where God has this thing called hashgacha, where he's looking after the world and interacting with the world in these different ways, and that is reflected in our eyes. So now if we were to work back the way, we'll find that people like Shari, or even anyone who came from the biological angle, for example, in terms of thinking about the human eye or anything like that, is actually going to have an advantage in understanding spirituality, because you have a head start. If you understand the human eye, then you're on the way to understanding God's hashgacha, the way that God looks after the world. And this is basically where we bring it out broad again, which is that it's just an example. But as we said, Melo chol haaretz kavodo, and as the Ramchal himself said, the whole idea of basically everything in this world looking the way that it is because it's a reflection of God, and he wants you to be able to learn about him and to connect to him. So really we just went into tons of depth on just one small thing, and now you look at all the amazing both entities and even events in the world, and see that really all of these are opportunities to learn about the divine and connect to spirituality and go further. So yeah, what do you think about this? Yeah.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Is this referencing mainly like natural phenomena like a tree? Or like, someone built this table, but this table was made of a tree?
Amazing question. I also have this question. I'll just say Lola's question was, for sure we're talking about natural phenomena here, for sure. He's Nivraim, he says, things which are created by God. So that's for sure part of this. What about human creations or artificial existences? So what about those? So let's talk. There's a table, and there's all manner of things. I had the same question, because I tell you, I started to get. It's always a funny story, but basically I got one of these electric scooters, right? And if anyone knows about them, they're very popular in Jerusalem. And so I started to. I didn't have a bike before in Jerusalem, but I started to notice the cycle paths, the bike paths, and they're like amazing, like these amazing bike paths, and they're like, I just think like, like, what does this have to do with this whole story? A person came along and made these bike paths. Like, what does that fit into this? I have the same question. What do people think? What do you think?
I feel like, table is an interesting example. I can't remember, but there's like rabbis who, like, it used to be a tradition you'd be buried with the wood from your table, because like you guys have heard this? Yeah, I think it's like Talmudic. I think it goes way back to the idea that like because you did, like, there's so many mitzvot related to your table. You have Shabbat dinner, like you welcome strangers and stuff, that people would be like, make my coffin out of my table. Like, so I think I see. Yeah, it's really cool. I wish I knew the details, but
That's interesting. I'll just say that there's this tradition. I didn't know this, that there was an idea that people would be buried with the wood, meaning the coffin would be made out of the wood from their table, because the table in many ways is a lot of your good work in life. Is for your table, for your hospitality, and all different study, maybe all different kinds of things. Fascinating. So yeah, it's like
The other thing is the creativity and the ingenious to come up with inventions and whatever objects that we've created is, I was just thinking of the connection to creativity and being ingenious and God.
Yeah, certainly.
But the only thing I'm concerned about is AI.
That's the next level question. So I really don't know the answer to that one yet, but I'll just reflect back on that. I just say, maybe there's more questions on it. But yeah, like the one of the points which brought up was AI, which is the next. So we've talked about natural phenomena, and then there's man-made, or even it could be animal-made phenomena, meaning things which were made by natural things, and then there's AI, which is things which are made by non-natural things. It's quite interesting. Yeah.
Well, a good friend of ours once said, the very fact that there are nowadays disabled spaces means there is a God.
Yeah, he said he said this mentor of mine. He said the disabled parking spaces are the biggest. He said it's the biggest influence of Torah in the world. I think that's what he said. Because I think that his point was that if you know it's not really nice to talk about, but you know what they did to disabled people in the ancient world, right? They were undesirable, right? And then the fact that disabled people now became people who we cater for even more than others, what they need.
Yeah.
So that was something that the Torah brought into us. It was very, very interesting, very interesting idea. Yeah, Nathaniel.
Connecting to AI can also say we are the gods of AI, because our God is our creator of the nature.
Yeah.
We are the
Creator of AI.
is the
Yeah, well, that's quite an interesting point because it takes. I was saying about AI. It's like we, in some ways, are what we call the gods of AI, meaning God created us and then we created that. So it's going ahead and creating things, but it was people who made AI. Okay, it takes somewhat of a life of its own, but it didn't create itself, which is interesting.
Not yet. So.
Right. But then there was still an initial set. I don't know. This is like two shiurim down the line. I don't know the answer yet. Gillian, what do you think?
You don't have to take my questions. You can say somebody else if you want to.
Yeah, good enough.
But it's like there's a division. We tend to say this is good, this is bad, and sometimes we say this is a grey area. And because let's take, for example, the people who want power for the love of power, who want money and they love money, as opposed to people who want to create a better world, a better place for other people, so that we can all, we can all prosper, or we can all do better at least. Yeah. Which is an example of the disabled parking spaces, right. Or something like that. Let's take an example. Go back to what we were talking about, the Tanakh. Okay, so Joseph becomes this grand vizier in Egypt, and it's a vicious regime. I mean, it's not a nice regime at all, but Joseph's done well. But come before the famine, everybody could die in this famine. So how does he save them? He saves them in a way that you might think of as compassionate or kind, but basically everybody sells the clothes off their back to be able to buy food. They lose their land. The whole country goes into slavery, which is really significant. They all become feudalized, yes, if not exactly slavery. Right. They become the chattels of the pharaoh. I mean, he saved hundreds of thousands of lives, but the cost is huge. Yeah. And we know that this wisdom was given him by God, but the cost is enormous. And sometimes we have our moral compass is not so sure what's right and what's problematic. Yeah, I hear that. Yeah, but and so I think what Gillian was the main point there is bringing up is that there's gray areas. So we're talking about what do we think about human-made things? What do we think about artificial intelligence and what it makes and stuff? But there's also, it doesn't have to be binary. It never is. The truth is, it's never like that. At least in as far as Jewish ways of looking at things, it's never like that. It's always something nuanced.
But it brings human beings into the moral, spiritual responsibility in the application of AI. So it doesn't negate still that we're not. There's something that's still. It's our responsibility in how it's used or abused, right?
Yeah,
So we never get away from the connection to God through our actions and through our connection with what we've created.
Yeah, 100%. And I'll just make one even smaller response to Lula's point. I think people made a lot of good points there. Just also one other small response is that I'm tempted to believe that, at least even without getting all the way to the AI step yet, but just in terms of call it man-made creations, that there is a certain level of godliness which could be reflected in that for a few reasons. But parts of the thing, it's kind of like relates to Nathaniel, but Nathaniel said in some ways, but we know we're made in the image of God. And one of the things which it means to be made in the image of God is to be creative.
Exactly.
And so we are,
Yeah.
maybe it's a secondary level of doing so, or maybe not, could be. It'd be interesting to think about that. But that's coming from we say, that God planted the life of the worlds inside of us. So it's from things that God gave us that we do this creativity. So it could certainly be related. I don't know the full answer to that question, but that's where I kind of lean at the moment. But it's interesting.
Can I just ask, in connection with this? Can I just ask, Classic? Is there any chance that that this text was partly influenced by Greek philosophy? Because I'm just aware of the similarities with especially Platonic philosophy, Plato's theory of forms and ideas. So, and in fact, the form of the table is part of Plato's thinking. There's the ideal table in the sense.
So it's a good one. So I'll give.
Could it be the other way round?
Correct. So I'll give a general. I'll give a general response to that. I'll give a general response to that point. Is that it's hard to tell. Here are the options. One option is the question was how much may this have been affected, this approach of the Ramchal have been affected by Greek philosophy, let's say, because there's a lot of crossovers. So one approach could be, yes, it was, and that's why there's crossovers. Another approach could be what Ross said, is the other way around, because he's writing in the 18th century, but he's quoting ancient sources much before the Greeks. So it could be it's the other way around. There's some reasons to believe that might be the case. Maybe it's a bit of both. Maybe it's a little bit of interaction, and who knows, is that a good thing? Is that not a good thing? Maybe you'd say it's not a good thing because it's not authentic in our tradition. Maybe you'd say, oh, maybe God put Greek philosophy in the world to teach us, to kind of steer us in the right direction. All options are open. If it's the thing that it really was genuinely influenced by Greek philosophy, and it's as simple as that, but it's not ideal if that was the case, because then it's a tradition which wasn't from divine origin, and we disagree with a lot of things in Greek philosophy. However, it could easily be but maybe yes, or it could be one of those nuanced options. So I don't know the actual answer to that, but those would be some of the options which would exist. And I'll say one kind of final point on that is that if there is crossovers, it's quite interesting between things that we read in Jewish texts, be they more recent or more ancient, and other systems in the world. It's not necessarily anything to be scared of, really, because if you think about it, what we're trying to talk about here is truth. Is that there is something which is a true reality in the spiritual DNA of the world. So it could well be that multiple groups of people had that sensitivity to observe truth in the world. So it's not necessarily just because there's crossover. It's not necessarily something which the Jewish tradition which should be scared of. Could be that even better. It's even more of evidence that there's some kind of truth in what's going on. So I don't know, but that's just some general point. So what I want to do is I want to give a couple of closing remarks here. I'm not going anywhere, but just to give people the chance to leave and all that if they would like.
And then you might put another pot of tea.
Okay. So here's the thing on it. So this is how many people here? People here. Some people live in Edinburgh for a short time or a longer time. There was a book written by David Dyfus called Two Worlds, right? So there was this book. It was by he became a professor of English literature, right? In his own right. But the book is about his childhood as the son of the rabbi of Edinburgh in the 1920s and 30s. And he wrote the book and he entitled it Two Worlds because he felt that he lived in two different worlds. He felt like when he went to shul, he was like living in a Jewish world, and then when he went to school, etc., he was in a different. It was a different world, and he felt he was between two. Yeah, there you go. Yeah, he felt he was in these two worlds. I want us to write a new book, which is called One World. That's why. That's my challenge for us is that there's no such thing as you're Jewish in the shul and you're something else outside. There's no such thing as God is to be found in this place and not that place. There's no such thing as, you know, I'm living one life in one realm and then living another life in another realm. Because as we've learned tonight, God is to be found absolutely everywhere, but as Gary was saying, in all entities and in all events. And so even, you know, I went with my brother to the football the other day, to the soccer, and I just found myself thinking the whole time. I was like, what can I learn from this? I was trying to, because it's not something I do very much in Judaism. So I was like, what's the story with this? Like, is there something to take from this? And like, that's the kind of thing, you know, in those apparently mundane realms, there's no such thing as a mundane realm. There is everything is an opportunity for connection, opportunity to learn something, and I think that would be the challenge based on some of the things that we learned tonight, is that we have not two worlds, but we have rather one world. And that world, the world that we see around us, is a world of godliness, it's a world of spirituality, and it's a world of connection. So it's the food for thought for tonight.